Dilhan, this is a great opportunity. So I got thinking of all the people who one could interview for 15 minutes on stage, who would it be? Who would like the most exciting, interesting person be? I didn't even have to AI that one. I could come right up with the answer, and it would be you.
Must be a very short list.
And it would be you. So it's a great pleasure to have you here. There's so much that we could talk about. I want to get into financial inclusion in just a moment. But first of all, I think for this group, we'd love to hear top of mind. What are you thinking about, Temasek? You've gone through a little bit of restructuring lately. What is behind the restructuring? What's it all about? And what is it in response to?
Thanks, John. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank Mastercard for inviting me here. Look, I think that the world today has never been in this position, I think, for decades since World War II. It's not that we're in a world where there are wars and so on, because just 50 years ago, the world had many wars. There were factiousness in society and the like. But today, we're in a little bit of disarray and how to react to things which are coming fast and furious against us. And I think that leads to a lot of uncertainty in the world, especially if you're an investor, if you're a corporate executive, or even if you're individuals or you're just participating in society as a whole. And the big problem is that the leading country in the world that's managed to keep us all together, the glue, has become the most unpredictable country in the world. Many political scientists would say that the US has always been unreliable, but it's indispensable. And I think we're feeling it right now because, as my Prime Minister recently said in an interview with the FT editor, in the post-American world, who will fill the vacuum being left by the US in terms of leadership of the world? And it's very difficult to say that because many of the institutions that have kept us together, that's allowed for inclusion, allowed for prosperity, it's come about because of the largesse of the United States, and that's not happening right now. So that's the first thing that we have to think about. So that unpredictability causes investors like us to have to relook at the framing of our strategies, our assumptions, our scenarios differently. You have to almost put aside orthodoxy and rethink what the world is and how it's likely to happen in the future. So the one thing I tell you is globalization, as we've all known, the globalization from which my country, most of ASEAN, and myself have profited from, has gone. And the new form of globalization is not yet known. Will we see plurilateralism as the way of going forward rather than multilateralism? I think in the initial few years, that will be the case because it's almost a coalition of willing on different issues to come together and advocate things which are beneficial for larger group. And that plurilateralism causes us to relook in how we invest in companies, how our companies should transform themselves, and things like that. But even if you put aside these geopolitical forces and rising populism, nationalism, protectionism, which can lead to fragmentation, there is, of course, the advent of AI. And AI is multidimensional. It will affect us in the political space, the social space, and of course, the economic space. And so far, the focus has been really on AI from the business perspective. But the knock-on effects of AI also has a societal impact, especially when it has an impact on jobs, white collar and blue collar. And so for every country, the idea of how to deal with AI has to traverse beyond the economic into the social as well. And the same thing for a company like Temasek, because we're not just an investor, we're a holding company of a number of operating companies that have about $200 billion of revenue consolidated with us. And we have 166,000 people working for our companies in Singapore, and another maybe 100,000 outside of Singapore. And so how do we treat the workforce? Because you can't be advocating a business model that allows for continuing capitalistic outcomes without thinking about the way in which you deal with the workforce, which has a direct impact on society, which if you don't think of it clearly, will come back and affect you from a business model perspective. So those are the top of the world issues that we're thinking about as causes to rethink and reframe the way we see Temasek for the future.
So let's talk about ASEAN for a second. So ASEAN sits between two competing poles. So how do you navigate that tension in capital allocation as you sit around that capital allocation table without being pulled too far in one particular direction?
So I think that the first thing is that I don't think you think of it from the perspective of neutrality. Neutrality may be a too simplistic a term from where we stand as a capital allocator And if you think of it, if you're defining the two poles as the two superpowers, the US and China, and that's the way, I think you have to approach it in a principled way, that your capital is for good. You have to do well, then you have to do right, and you can do good. And to do that, you have to have discipline in how you allocate your capital, how you deploy your capital, and for the returns you expect to have, and then the consequential actions that can come from the use of your capital. And so it's not just a function of whether you invest in the US or invest in China, and we invest in both, but also the other places that benefit from a globalized world that can also, in a way, traverse this big chasm between great power contestation. That includes, investing in Europe. One thing is to paint Europe as if it's just negative, but within Europe, we have so many good companies which are innovative, globally competitive, and so on. You can invest in the Middle East today because they're becoming much more globalized, much more integrated with the global world. You can invest in Southeast Asia because despite the fact that we are a very motley group of countries coming together, there's a universality in how we look at things within ASEAN. You can invest in Australia as well and other places. So I would say that you can still invest beyond just these two countries. But the issue you face is whether the investment in one country conflicts with your ability to navigate in the other country. So far, we've managed to do it because at the end of the day, when we deal with the regulators on both sides and we deal with companies and so on, we've been very transparent, and we found that they've also been very pragmatic so far. So I think as of now, it's challenging, but it's not been impossible or supremely difficult to do.
So I want to get your take on the march of technology. So is technology outpacing government's ability to A, understand it, and B, to regulate it?
I think for sure, because you see, technology and the innovation behind it comes from people who see an issue and want to disrupt it, generally. But that's the way you actually are able to move technology forward and leap boundaries and things like that. So the mindset of a person who comes up with the most innovative business model or most technologically advanced model is to displace something. But that's how you get value, because otherwise incumbency is always difficult to displace. When that comes up, then the rules that you have right now to regulate existing technology or legacy technology may not be so relevant in the context of new technology which is coming up. Just think about AI as a very simple manifestation of that. And so government's ability to embrace those changes is sometimes hampered by legacy rules and regulations. It's almost better to be in a country where there are not that many legacy rules and regulations, because then you start from from an even keel with technology. Think about countries that went from informal to mobile first without going through from informal to formal to mobile first. They've managed to traverse this entire journey much more quickly than most other developed economies have been able to do so. So regulation typically lags technology. And by the time you go through the normal process of getting legislation formulated and passed through legislations, assuming you have a democracy, the time lag will put you behind the curve in terms of where technology is advancing.
So in the remaining time, I want to get to inclusive growth in just a moment. But the time capsule shoots us forward 5 years. We're sitting here in 5 years. ASEAN is the fourth largest economy in the world. AI is ubiquitous in terms of adaptation, utilization. What are we saying about AI 5 years from now?
Well, increasingly, if you talk to the people who are right in the middle of AI and knowledgeable about it, they take the view that AGI will become a reality before 2030. Okay, so that's 4 years from now, four and a half years from now. Now, that's not a long time, if you think about it. And if it's coming that fast, then the impact on a number of things, which includes businesses and workforce, is going to be massive. So if I look at it from that perspective, you really need to anticipate that sort of change that's going to happen and start to put in place the building blocks for how you have to ameliorate the effects of it in the future. So I would say that AI is the biggest impactful thing that's going to happen to us if we were to sit here in 5 years' time. I hope I'm retired by then, because AI will also transform our business. I'll just give you, if I may, I'll just give you an example. If I were to take my 30-page investment deck that I get from my team for our investment committee for approval of a deal and run it past ChatGPT, in a matter of 30 minutes, ChatGPT comes out with 5 or 6 pages that could probably address 80% of what's in my deck. Now, that 80% has to do with the baseline of data that then leads to the analysis that you make. So right now, AI can get me to a level where all my associates and my senior associates will become redundant. Okay, so what I then need for balance of 20% is actually judgment, which today comes from, we can say superior intelligence, you might want to say that, but generally comes from experience as well. Okay, so for people like me, you can't rely on intelligence, it's general experience. So that level is still relevant right now because AI hasn't come to be able to supplant the consequences of experience, or for that matter, higher level intelligence. Now, AI comes from the way in which you train the models and reinforce learning. Now, how you train the models right now is more based on linearity, so therefore the ability to do 80% is there. The minute AI gets into the realm of ASI, artificial superintelligence, and you got the lateral thinking comes of it, well, that's a very different world. Okay? So in my industry itself, we're using AI. I mean, a lot of investment managers are looking at AI now, not just for the workflows in their business operations, but how to source the best deals possible, how to analyze these deals, how to do performance monitoring, how to do active portfolio management. Now, that's the gamut of what we do in terms of our business as a global investor. Now, the question for me is very simply this. Will AI still lead to us having business models which are human-centered, human-led? But that's the essence of humanity. Will AI be the co-pilot, or will it be the pilot, and we be the co-pilot? So I hope we never get to that, having to contemplate that world.
Well put. Okay, we got a minute left. ASEAN leaders are meeting. President Trump will be among them, maybe others. The theme is inclusion and sustainability. What are we likely to read in the headlines on Monday or Tuesday morning?
Peace done between Thailand and Cambodia. Nomination for the Nobel Peace Prize by ASEAN collectively.
All right, last question. We're talking about inclusion here. Give us a quick definition of how we should see and through what kind of lens we should see financial inclusion.
So, I think Mastercard is in a good position to do this because of the fact that you have a payment system that can lead to better financial inclusion, that actually provides is enabler for financial inclusion and folks like yourselves. Look, I think that everyone talks about ASEAN, 670, 680 million people, $4 trillion economy, great demographics, growth rate is up there and so on. And it's always been that promise, but we don't want it to be the land of perpetual promise. We have to actually make it happen. The fact remains that all 10 or soon 11 countries of ASEAN are quite different. Not just culturally, but the way in which our economic structures are based are very, very different. And so you can't compare Singapore, a small city-state, 729 square kilometers, 6 million people, with Malaysia or Indonesia or Philippines or Vietnam or Myanmar, whatever. You can't, because we're a city-state. You might want to compare us to Jakarta, you might want to compare us to KL, you might want to compare us to Bangkok, Manila. That's fine. And then you really compare, not just economic progress, but also social progress and way of life and things like that. But there's so many more people who are not part of that urban setting, who don't get the same benefits that we do from an urban setting. And we need to reach out to them and pull them up. Because if you want to be successful for the long run on a multi-decade basis, you can't leave behind significant numbers of your population who are not able to get the benefits of economic prosperity. And so our mantra in Temasek is so every generation prospers. And it means that we have to do well so we can do right and we can do good. Now, doing right means thinking about the future and being true to what's needed to get it done right. And for us, climate change is critical in ASEAN, to be dealt with in ASEAN. It is. Significant parts of ASEAN is archipelagic. Significant parts of ASEAN are maritime. And rising sea levels is an issue for us to consider. And the investment that we have made so far and projected to make, especially for climate change transition through to 2030 and beyond, is insufficient. So if you talk about sustainability, sustainability means many things, one of which is that sustainability also means about your country's economic progress and social progress. Sustainability also means looking to make sure that the country has a future for future generations by 2100, if you want to think that far. And so climate change becomes part of the equation. And then when it comes to inclusivity, is how do we make sure that populations outside the urban-rural divide, or in the urban-rural divide, are able to get access for them to be uplifted. That includes energy, that includes clean sanitation, that includes healthcare, and most of all is financial inclusion. And I think we all have a role to play in that.
Inspiring. Dilhan, CEO of Temasek, such a pleasure to have you with us here today.
Thank you very
so
much, everyone. Thank you.